Very, very excited for this program tasting tonight with the Zuccardi wines. First, before we get started, just a few programming notes. If you are in the Atlanta area, on March 7th, we'll be having a legacy dinner honoring Chef James Hemmings. Please look into that. Let all your friends know that are here in Atlanta. It's going to be a really great program. We've got a menu that's 4 courses that's curated based on foods that he has influenced in American cuisine. And we will be putting out some information for those who don't know much about Chef Hemmings. In the next few days, we'll be putting out some information on the Instagram so you can familiarize yourself with his contribution. Also on March 15th, we will be doing our first executive roundtable with Jasmine Hirsch of Hirsch Vineyards. She's the general manager and winemaker there. And that will be one of our Women's History Month programs. So that information and sign up will be coming out in the next day or so as well. So first I want to introduce Adam Sager with Wine Cellars Limited. He has been helping me curate this whole program, and he's been great to work with. Very excited to be here with you guys tonight. And Adam, can you just kind of give us a brief little rundown of your company, and then you can go ahead and introduce our guest for this evening.
Yes, thank you very much, Natasha. We are, very excited to be here with all of you, and it's a great turnout. I think when we first connected, you said you usually have maybe 25 to 30 people, and it looks like we're going to get to 40 or maybe 50. That's fantastic. I'm one of the owners of Wine Cellars Limited. We're a national import company based in the Chicagoland area, and we import wines from all over the world and sell to distributors all over the country. And we're always looking for new ways to reach people in the trade and even consumers and wine enthusiasts. And when I saw your nomination and win in the Wine Enthusiast Wine Star Awards, I reached out to congratulate leadership and suggested we try to find a way to do a program together, either a tasting in a market or a Zoom tasting like this. And what better way to do that than with Zuccardi, who was also nominated and won for New World Winery of the Year from Argentina. So we have Sebastian Zuccardi here. He's the 3rd generation winemaker and viticulturist at Valle de Uco Zuccardi, which is the winery that Zuccardi owns in Valle de Uco. And also they have a winery in Mendoza called Santa Julia. So he's here today to present to you 3 wines. I know you're all excited to have 3 wines. You maybe didn't get 3 wines before, but it's the best way, I think, to show the differentiation of Malbec across the different growing regions within the Uco Valley. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sebastian, and he will present to you. Thank you very much.
Hello, good evening for me, at least. Here is later, it's 9 o'clock. Thank you, Adam, for the introduction, and hello, everybody. First, my English is not perfect, so if you don't understand something, stop me and ask me. Or also, if you have any question about what I'm telling to you, please feel free to ask me. I prepared a presentation in order that we can travel a little bit through our history and also through our area. So I will share the presentation with you. This is in the picture, you can see our winery in the Uco Valley. I will explain you, but the Uco Valley is the highest altitude area in Mendoza where we live, and the altitude is the key of the wine area. Let me see. Okay, first, before to start, I believe that wine is place and people, or people and place. And every time that I buy or I open a bottle of wine, always I put attention from where is coming the wine and who makes the wine. And I believe that it's a connection that is impossible to separate. So the wine has to tell us the history of the place, but also the history of what happened in the area and the history of who makes the wine. So in this hour, we are going to try to explain you the history of my place, my family, and why the place where we live and cultivate is so unique. So like Adam told during the introduction, I'm the third generation in the family making wine. My grandfather, that you can see in the picture with my grandmother, they started in the 63. But it's interesting the history of my grandfather because he didn't have any relationship with wine. He had a building company. And at his building company, he developed a very efficient irrigation system. As you know, where we live is a desert, and the only way to cultivate is with irrigation. So the use of the water is extremely important. So my grandfather developed this efficient irrigation system, and he bought a property near to Mendoza with the idea to make a showroom. He was not looking to be maybe a winemaker. His idea was to make a showroom and show to other growers how his irrigation system worked. So for example, you have my grandfather that you can see on your left. He was showing at that time to other growers how his irrigation system worked. Luckily for me, he fell in love with agriculture. He discovered that really his passion was the viticulture, and he decided to continue planting vineyards. Really, my grandfather, I like to say that he was a philosopher, because when I was a kid, that I spent a lot of time with him in the vineyards. Every time that I went to the vineyard with him, he moved us to the limit between the vineyard planted and the desert. And he always talked us about that if we don't fight with the desert tried to recuperate what it had. So all the time, his obsession was about the nature and about the efficient use of water. Then my father joined the family, and he decided not to work in the building company. He decided to put his life in the winemaking area, and really was the big growth of the family. Today we are the third generation, and you can see the picture. This is my father and my brother and my sister, and all of us are very involved in the winery. So it's a really family company. All of us work in the family. And something that happened and was essential in the history of the family, and is that each of us in the third generation started something new for the family. So every change of generations happened a refundation in the family. I like to say that I feel founder like my grandfather. I'm not continue what my grandfather started or my father did. I feel that I did a refundation of the family. And each of us, like I was telling to you, started something quite new for the family. In my case, I'm the oldest. I studied agronomy, and when I joined the family, my family used to cultivate in low altitude areas. And I pushed to the family to go to cultivate to the Uco Valley. So we moved and we started planting vineyards in the Uco Valley in 2004. Today, I will show you, we have 8 vineyards in different areas in the Uco Valley, and the winery that you saw the picture at the beginning is a winery that is also in the Uco Valley. So I push the family to go to cultivate to higher altitude area. Julia, my sister, that she's in the middle, Julia runs the hospitality of the family. We have 3 restaurants in our wineries, and we receive many people that come every year to do an experience with us. So if you come to Argentina, for sure you have to visit us. And Miguel, the youngest, Miguel started a new activity for the family that is an old activity in the area, that is olive oil. Olives are very popular in the area because we had a very strong immigration from Italy and from Spain mainly. They brought the tradition to make and drink wine, but also the tradition, the Mediterranean tradition of olive oil. And Miguel, the family didn't cultivate any olive trees, and Miguel fell in love with olive oil And my grandfather started planting, and Miguel decided to put his life in making olive oil, and he's today I can say, because I don't make, he's today the best olive oil producer in the country. So all the family is very involved in the winery. We have 4 objectives in our family, and every decision that we take has to be in favor of these 4 objectives. If any decision is against of any of these 4 objectives, it's something that we don't have to do. First is quality. We think that everything that we do has to be in a quality way. And when we talk about quality in wine, we also talk about identity and about uniqueness. The second is innovation. We have been very innovative in all the life of the family. My grandfather started with the new irrigation system, but then my father was very innovative, and I are you going to see how the way that we see the places is also very innovative for the country today. The third is that we think that because we are a family company, we have to be very sustainable. So we are the biggest organic producer in the country. And the fourth is that we need to be useful in the society where we live. So we work a lot in the community, especially in education. We have schools in our properties, and we try that all our people can finish the studies, especially in areas that are far from the city, that is difficult to can do. We have been developing schools, and this is something that my grandmother started, and now Julia continue under the foundation that we have in the family. This is the history of the family, but if I have to tell you the history of the region, I like to say that Argentina is old world in new world. Why I'm saying this? Because if you think in the wine countries, and you know that the wine countries are classified in new world wine countries or old world wine countries, and when you think in Argentina, everybody think that is in the side of the new world wine countries like Chile, like South Africa, like Australia, like New Zealand. But if you see Argentina, Argentina is completely different for 3 things. First, because our origin was the immigration. We had a huge Italian and Spanish immigration, and that immigration brought the tradition to make wine, but also the huge tradition to drink wine. So for many years, all the wine that was made in the country was drinking in the country, until the 90s that Argentina started exporting. But Argentina has been making wine for more than 200 years. So we are a country that has a very long tradition making wine, and wine was not something that started looking exportation, was something that started because our national drink is wine. The culture of wine is in the country, like in France, like in Italy, like in Portugal, like in this kind of countries. The second thing is because the social structure of our viticulture is very spread. So it's full of wineries, it's full of small producers. So wine is part of our life. When you see in general Chile, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, or the new wine world countries, really the development of the wine was looking the exportation. In our country, it's completely different. So wine is part of our life. Let's go to talk a little bit about Argentina. When you see, this is a map of Argentina. Argentina is a long country in the South Hemisphere, no big like US, but is long. You have 3,000 kilometers from north to south. We have to know that in the west, all the west of Argentina, the Andes mountain cross and divide us and Chile. And the areas that you can see with colors are the cultivating areas with grapes. So the first thing that you have to see is that the wine areas are spread in Argentina from south to north. And the other thing that you have to see is that 99.9% is in the west of Argentina. So the relationship of our viticulture is very close to the Andes mountain. And this is what we are going to talk during the next minutes. If we want to travel to our area, we live in the middle of Argentina in an area that is Mendoza. So if we go to see Mendoza, this is where we live. Mendoza produces 80% of the wine of the country, but we are going to focus especially in the Uco Valley. The Uco Valley is the highest area, so the area that is closest to the mountain. So if I have to explain why the Uco Valley is so special, I have to talk about the mountain. And I like to explain that we make mountain wines. If I have to give you a definition of the wines that you are going to taste, our wines are mountain wines. The mountain gives the identity of everything that happened in our area. And I like to explain in 5 points. I put 4 there, but I believe that are 5. The first is landscape. The second is climate. The third is water. The fourth is soil. And the fifth is that we are mountain people. We are people who live next to the mountain. So everything that happened here is in relationship with the mountain. I like to say that when you wake up in Argentina, in Mendoza, before you open the eyes, you know exactly where is the Andes mountain. But let's go to talk and explain why we talk about mountain wines and why the mountain create a unique situation in our area. The first is the landscape. It's impossible to confuse when you are in our area. Always you have the Andes mountain in the back. So the vineyards are cultivating in flat areas, but very close to the Andes. This is also where our winery is, and you can see how close we are from the winery, from the mountain. The second is the climate. And if I have to give you a definition about our climate, we like to say that it's a high altitude desert. Look at the natural vegetation without irrigation. So we really live in a desert. And why we live in a desert? Because we are isolating from any ocean influence from the Andes mountain. We are very close to the Pacific Ocean, but any humid wind that comes from the Pacific Ocean arrive to the mountain, rain or snow, and cross very dry to our side. So if you see the area where we are cultivating, look at how green is Chile. Then you start crossing the Andes and you can see that we live in a layer that is a layer that has no any ocean influence. And when you go to the east, closer to the Atlantic, you have again ocean influence. So the first thing that you have to know is that we cultivate in a high altitude desert, which is one of the most continental wine areas around the world. So no any ocean influence. But when you think in a desert, you think in a place that is warm, in a place that the temperature is high. But because we are near to the Andes, we can climb and we can cultivate in high altitude. And what gives the high altitude to us? The high altitude gives the possibility to cultivate in fresher or cooler areas. So we live in a desert, but in a desert that is cold. So if we go to the Uco Valley, and sorry that in the map I have the black lines in meters, not in feet, but the important thing that I want that you see in this map is that in the Uco Valley, in 30 kilometers, you can duplicate the altitude. You can move from 1,800 feet of altitude until 5,500 feet of altitude. And what happens every time that you go up? Every time that you go up, you are moving to a cooler weather. So the second word that I want to introduce to you, and we are going to develop during the tasting, is that mountain wines, but also diversity. Diversity is the other key word that we need to have in our mind in order to understand the uniqueness of the Uco Valley. And the first thing that gives to us a lot of diversity is the different altitudes, because every altitude gives to us different climate conditions. But which is the difference in our area when we talk about cold climate is that in general, when you think about cold climate, you think in places that are cloudy and wet. But because we live in a desert in high altitude, we have a lot of light. We have more than 300 days with blue sky. And the other thing is that because we are high and we are closer to the sun and we have very low humidity in our air, the light is very pure. We have a very intense UV irradiation. So our wines talk in terms of climate conditions about a desert in high altitude, in cooler weathers, but with a very high intensity of light. And this is unique, cold and light. The third thing, or the second thing that the Andes give to us is the water. All the water that we use to irrigate come from the snowmelt. And remember that I told you, it's not possible to irrigate, it's not possible to cultivate a vineyard without irrigation. So water is essential. And in order that you understand how dry is our desert, it's only possible to cultivate 3% of the surface. Why? Because the water is only enough for this 3% of the surface. So look at this picture. Our mountain during the winter is completely white. Then when the earth, when the temperatures rise during the springtime and summer, all this snow melt and all this water comes through the rivers and is the water that we use to irrigate. The fourth thing are the soils. And I will try not to be very technical in my explanation, but it's important that you can understand that when I say diversity, the diversity that we have in our wines come from the altitude that create different climate conditions, but also from the soils. All the soil where we are cultivating came from the Andes mountain. So we have to say that our soils are alluvial soils. How to recognize an alluvial soils is easy. When you see round stones, is because all these stones came rolling with the water. So when we see round stones, immediately we have to say this is an alluvial soil. How was the origin of an alluvial soil? You have to imagine that millions of years ago, we had big glaciers in the mountain. Then the earth heated, all these glaciers melt, and the water came from the Andes mountain to the flat areas. When the water came from the Andes mountain to the flat areas, push material. So all the material where we are walking, where our vines are growing, where the roots of our vines are growing, is material that millions of years ago was in the Andes mountain. But the question is, all the alluvial soils are the same? No. Alluvial is the way that the soils were formed. But the alluvial soils can have a very big diversity. The first source of diversity is how close or how far you are from the beginning of the alluvial fan. This is like if I put in a glass of water, stones, and I threw the glass of water on the table. At the beginning, the water will have energy, so will push stones. Then the water will spread and will have less energy, so will push less stones. And at the bottom, the water will so spread that will not have enough energy to push the stones. So what happened in an alluvial fan is that the beginning of the alluvial fan, we are going to have big size of stones. In the middle, the stones are going to be smaller and deeper. And in the bottom of the alluvial fan, we are not going to have any stone. This is the first source of diversity. And the second source of diversity is the origin of the alluvial fans. I don't want to complicate a lot, and I will tell you many names today. I don't want that you remember all the names, but I want that you have an idea that when we explain and when we talk about our area, we need to know the origin, we need to know the names of the place. This is the Uco Valley. In order that you have an idea, I put two alluvial fans in the Uco Valley, the two biggest alluvial fans near to the biggest rivers. But there are in the Uco Valley 44 different alluvial fans. So the complexity that you have in the Uco Valley is huge. And the second, and the second source of diversity is the Andes mountain. When you see a picture in our area of the mountain, you see one chain and you think that you have only one mountain. But when you see a satellite picture, you have to know that we have 3 chains of mountains in our area. Why I'm explaining this? Because each chain of mountain has a different geologic origin. So the Precordillera, that is the oldest, has a different geologic origin than the Cordillera Frontal and a different geologic origin than the Cordillera Principal. If you see where is the Uco Valley, where is the Uco Valley has no influence from the Precordillera. So it's in front of the Cordillera Frontal. But back the Cordillera Frontal, we have the Principal Cordillera. And why I'm telling that these are two different origins, and I will try to explain in a very simple way, because the Cordillera Frontal is completely granitic, so it's volcanic. All the stones that we are going to see in this Cordillera are volcanic origin, so it's granite. But when we travel to the Principal Cordillera, we have to imagine that before the Cordillera were there, we had the ocean here. Then the plate crashed, and the bottom of the ocean go up until 18,000 feet of altitude. So what happened today when we go to the mountain is that in the mountain we can find, for example, fossils. Why? Because part of the ocean was there, then the plate crashed, and all this material go up. Then when the alluvial movements happen, push all this material from the Principal and Frontal Cordillera to the areas where we are cultivating. So the uniqueness of our area is that if you break a stone, the heart of the stone is granite, and the layer that covers the stones is calcaire material. Why I'm explaining this? Because in the world in general, when we talk about granitic soils, is granite, and when we talk about calcaire soils, is calcaire. But in our area, we have a unique mix of material. So the uniqueness of our place comes from two things. That is cooler weather with light, and this unique combination of granite and calcaire. Look at how the roots of our vines growing, hugging these stones. All the time that we open a hole in the soil to see the stones, we can see that the stones are all the time hugging these stones. But in order that you can see how stony can be our soils, look at these two pictures from two different areas in the Uco Valley. Alluvial soils, I told you, it's easy to recognize. When you see round stones, immediately you have to say this is an alluvial soil. These two areas are very high because it's the beginning of the alluvial fan. So the water had a lot of energy to push the stones. And the third thing that you can see is the quantity of calcaire that we have in the soils. So what happens if I come back to the Uco Valley? If I come back to this map of the Uco Valley and we cross the altitude of the Uco Valley with the position, with the mountain, with the kind of soil that we have. What happened? We need to talk about the villages of the Uco Valley. So many years ago was enough to talk about Argentina. Then we understood that was not enough to talk about Argentina. We had to talk about the north of Argentina, to talk about Mendoza, to talk about the Patagonia. In our area, we saw that was not enough to talk about Mendoza. So we divided Mendoza in 4 valleys. And we started talking about one of these valleys, that is the Uco Valley. But today we know that it's not enough to talk about the Uco Valley, that if we want really to go in depthness with the explanation of the place, we need to talk about the villages in the Uco Valley. So all this map that you are seeing are the different villages that you can find in the Uco Valley. What happens if I pick 5 of these different villages of the Uco Valley and I show you the altitude and the soil? Look at the variation that we have in terms of soils and altitude in the Uco Valley. So talk about the Uco Valley like one thing is not enough, because we have a big diversity in terms of altitude and combination with the soils. And I put 5, I can put 20 different areas and you have 20 different expressions. What happened if I make these 5 wines and I put only in the label Malbec? What I'm doing? I'm doing a commodity. Why? Because you can plant Malbec in US, you can plant Malbec in New Zealand, you can plant Malbec in France, and you can make Malbec. But when you talk about Paraje Altamira, when you talk about San Pablo, when you talk about Gualtajari, you are talking on something that is impossible to repeat because it's the uniqueness of the combination of the landscape, the climate conditions through the altitude and the how close and far are from the Andes, and the kind of soils that you have. So I will not boring anymore, and we are going straight to taste, but I want that we taste the two polygonous wines that you have in front of you. Why? Because we are going to taste two wines made by the same producer, two wines made in the same year, two wines made with the same grape, Malbec, two wines made in the same way, but what's changed the area where the wines are coming from. If I come back to the map, we are going to taste two wines, one from San Pablo and the second one from Gualtallarí. So I prefer if you can put in this order. First, San Pablo, and second, Gualtallarí. Before to taste the wine, I will leave sharing, and I don't know if you have any question about all the explanation that I gave to you. No, it's clear.
So Seba, I wanted to ask about calcare. Calcare, which is the white surrounding the stones, that's calcium carbonate. That's also considered limestone, right?
Yes, yes and no. Limestone is when it's the bottom of the ocean, then the ocean went out and left the limestone.
Okay.
When we talk about our calcare, it's the same material, but was moving by the water. But the effect in the wine is the same. The effect in the wine is that this kind of soils give to us a lot of texture in the wine. You know, always when we talk about wine, we talk about color, smell, and taste. But we have to know that the tongue can feel texture also. When you put the wine in your mouth, you can feel also the texture of the wine. So I like that you put attention in all the wines that we are going to taste, because for me, the message from this kind of soil, the special message from this kind of soil, come from the limestone or the calcare that we have in the soils. And when I talk about texture, imagine lick a chalk. Yes, do you remember when we went to the school with the chalk? All this powder, or if you lick a chalk, the feeling is a feeling like dry in the tongue, but also a little bit of salinity. The first wine that you have in front of you come from San Pablo. San Pablo is a place that I want to show you. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I want first to show you a picture of San Pablo. In order, one second. In order that you can have an idea how high is the place and how close from the Andes. So it's a vineyard that is 200 meters from the Andes mountain. So, and the second thing is 4,800 feet of altitude. So when we talk about altitude, we are talking about a cooler climate, but also when we are closer to the mountain, is cooler. So San Pablo is one of the coldest areas in the Uco Valley. When I say the coldest area, I'm saying that is the last grape that I harvest in the Uco Valley. So the expression of this wine is an expression that will talk to us about this freshness. So you are going to see that in the wine, we are not going to have only red or black fruit. We are going to have a lot of flowers like violets. We are going to have also a lot of herbs, natural herbs that we have in the mountain that tell us the influence of the landscape, but also the freshness of the place where we are cultivating. And I like if you can compare with Gualtajari. Gualtajari, I will come back to a picture. This is Gualtajari. It's an area that is high, but it's a little bit far from the Andes. So it's an area that ripe faster than San Pablo. In order that you have an idea, between Gualtajari and San Pablo, you have 1 month of difference in ripening. First Gualtajari and then San Pablo. But the uniqueness of Gualtajari is that the soils are extremely calcareous and extremely stony. So what we are going to find in Gualtajari is that the tannic structure of the wine is much higher than San Pablo. And the nose, because we are in a riper area, the nose will be more black fruit and herbs expression at the same time. But put a lot your attention in the mouth about the structure, the tannic structure of these two different wines.
Sebastian, can you speak a little bit about the ideal temperature to taste Malbecs? We're all tasting the wine in different places and in different parts of the country, even in
Yes.
fact, and I'm sure everyone is tasting the wine at different temperatures. What do you feel is the ideal temperature?
Yes, but I will tell you in Celsius, and you have to move to Fahrenheit because I don't know how to.
Yeah.
But I like to start with the wines, not in natural temperature, a little bit light, cooler. Why?
Yeah.
Because I feel that the wine is better that open in the glass. So I like to start with the wine next to 17 degrees Celsius degrees, put in the glass and leave that the wine take temperature alone in the glass. Why? Because we live in a place. Can you did the
Yeah, like 63 degrees.
Okay.
65 degrees, something. Yeah.
Why?
So much cooler than room temperature, clearly. And
Yes,
not
yes.
quite cellar temperature. Yeah. But everyone can, you all have a bottle, so you can actually put the wine on ice or in the fridge a little bit and then come back to it later and see how it's changed the aromatics and even the texture of the wine in the mouth.
Yes. Another thing that I want to talk is that why Malbec? Why Malbec is synonym of Argentina? Malbec was not a marketing plan. Malbec was something that happened in the history and in the field. I told you that we had a very strong Italian and French and Spanish immigration, and that people brought grapes from their areas. Also, we had a French immigration. And many grapes were planted in Argentina. But through generation and generations of growers, that they were not looking the market, they were looking the vineyards, the adaptation that Malbec shows was very good. So viticultures decided to continue planting and replanting Malbec. So the Malbec that we have is a material that has been very well adapted to our area. It's a material that has been selecting through generations and generations of growers. So was not that someone say, which grape is not planting in another country, so we are going to plant and then we are going to be famous because this grape is part of the history of the country. No, it was something that happened in the field. And when Argentina started exporting, no other country had Malbec in the volume that Argentina had. So Malbec is synonym of Argentina because it's part of the history. But the most important thing for me is that Malbec is like Pinot in Argentina, is like Pinot Noir in Burgundy, is like Nebbiolo in Piemonte, is like Sangiovese in Tuscany. It's a grape that is part of the DNA of the place and also is very transparent to the place. So when I put San Pablo, a Gualtajari wine made with Malbec, we can see the difference of the place because we are not talking about the characteristic of the grape, we are talking more about the characteristic of the place. Any questions so far?
Yep, I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us and educating us as well. So my understanding is the French influence is very strong in Mendoza, specifically around like how, like you said, you mentioned the grapes coming over, but also like the influence of how the wine is actually made, like using French oak versus using American oak in the barrels. So I was curious, you guys use concrete, is that correct? What was the decision for that? And which is a little bit different than the rest of the valley?
We are going to talk now about this, but it's very important that we had a very strong Italian influence at the beginning. French influence was stronger in the 90s, where Bordeaux was so successful that Bordeaux spread the way to make wine from all the region. But if you see the old wineries in Argentina, the old wineries in Argentina were concrete at big cask, big old oak cask. So yes, we work with concrete, but I believe that this is nothing new. It's back to the future. We are going back to the roots of the area, because the small barrels and the new barrel is something that arrived during the 90s with all this Bordeaux influence. In my view, it's not, I don't know. I believe that we have to make wines looking our places and our grapes. And I believe that small barrels is good maybe for Cabernet Sauvignon in a cloudy and cold weather, but it's not exactly good for Malbec in a sunny place in high altitude. Why? Because in my view, Malbec is extremely sensitive to oak and is extremely sensitive to microoxygenation. And in oak, you have much more microoxygenation than in concrete. But let me show you a couple of pictures and go deeper.
Thank you.
To the concrete concept. Wait a minute. Let me open. First, I have to tell you that I like to cultivate wines, or I like to say that we cultivate wines. That the most important thing that we have to show in a wine is the identity of the place. We don't want to talk about the winery. We want to talk about the vineyards and the place. The winery is important. It's extremely important, because if you have a great place, you make a great viticulture, then you need to work well in the winery. But our challenge is that when you taste a wine that we make, you can say, okay, this is the transparent and precise expression of the place where the grapes are coming from. So let me go first to show you our winery. Our winery is inspiring in the Andes mountain. So the winery is part of the Andes, and the winery was all built with stones, sand and water from the Andes mountain. So all the stones that you see there is because I took us in this property 1,000 trucks with stones to plant this vineyard. And then we use many of these stones to build the winery. When we go into the winery, all the winery was built with concrete vats. I told you, concrete was part of the history of our country. In order that you have an idea, my grandfather started the winery with concrete. Then my father moved to stainless steel, and now we came back to concrete. So it's back really to the future. But why concrete? Concrete, I like to say that there are 5 things that are important for me. But the first that you have to know is that concrete is not the magic material. If you put a bad grape in concrete, you're going to have a bad wine. Concrete is part of the winery, but the most important thing is the place where we are cultivating, how we cultivate, and then concrete is the last step in the winery. But concrete for us has 5 very important things. The first, that is a natural material. It's a material that is made with stone, sand, water, and cement. Okay, but the sand, the stone, and the water came from the property. So there is a big connection between the place where we cultivate and the winery. The second thing is that the concrete is very efficient in the management of temperature, because the wall of a concrete is very thick. So in an area where we live, that the days are very warm and the nights are very cold, With concrete, you save a lot of energy because you isolate a little bit what is happening in than outside. The third thing is a material that don't give any taste and any flavor to the wine. So if we want to talk about the areas, we need a material that don't give any taste and any flavor. Because if I show you San Pablo or Gualtallarí, the same tasting that we did before, that the two wines were fermented and aged in concrete. And imagine that I put in barrel and I over oak, we are going to talk about vanilla or chocolate. That is something that is not coming from the terroir. It's something that is coming from the winery. So I love from concrete that don't give any taste and any flavor. And because I'm not looking to make a perfect wine, I'm looking to make a wine that talk about the uniqueness of the place where we are cultivating. I need a material that the place express their aromas and their taste. The fourth thing that the concrete gives to us is that we have a micro-oxygenation. Yes, you have, because it's a pore material, we don't use epoxy inside, it's raw concrete in touch with the wine. So you have a micro-oxygenation, but less micro-oxygenation than a barrel. And in our view, Malbec is a grape that don't like too much micro-oxygenation. And especially because our area has too much light, that when we move into the winery, we need that the wines close. We need that the wines, close. So we've found that concrete is a great material for our for make our wines. So the third wine that you have, if you see the name and the label, is Concreto. Yes, this is a very special wine in my winemaking life because it's a wine that we started making in 2014 in our winery and was the first harvest that we did in this winery. And at that time, when we started making this wine, the typical shape of Malbec was something very concentrate, black in color, very powerful in concentration, high alcohol, and with a lot of extraction. So the feeling was sweetness. Well, when we started working in Altamira, that is the place where these grapes are coming from, and we discover all these charcoal soils, we said, come on, we need to reduce the overripe, the over extraction, and the over oak, and we need to show the texture of the wine. So this is a wine that comes from the most stoniest soils of our property. So we harvest 1,000 kilos there, 300 kilos there, 400 kilos there. We put in the concrete vats. We don't distill, so it's whole bunch fermentation. We crush like all times with our feet. So we jump in the vats and we crush with our feet. And then the fermentation and the aging was in concrete. So it's 100% concrete. It's a Malbec, 100% from Paraje Altamira. So I want that when you taste, when you put in the nose and in the mouth, you can focus again on the texture. Our challenge was avoid sweetness and focus on the identity and the texture of the place. This is a wine that changed my life making wine because I was thinking about this and I was reducing the use of oak and I reduced the extraction. But after make this wine in 2014, I said, come on, this is the way that I want to make the wine. This is the identity of the wines that I want to make. So after making this wine, that was not only a revolution for me and my family, it was also a big change for Argentina. I said, okay, this is the way that I want to work. And I started making all my top wines when I work with Malbec, fermented and aging in concrete.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Did it take a while for the consumers to like the new type of wine, or did they immediately like gravitate towards what you were making?
You know, the first thing that I have to tell you is that I can do this because we are a family company and we can take our decisions. Maybe if you are not a family company, it's difficult to take this decision to move to this side. The second is that we were not afraid about what the market will say. We did because we like it. We feel that this was the style of wine that we like. But my father asked me many times what the consumers will think about this. And yes, at the beginning was a little bit tough. Was not for everybody. But today you can see that more and more people is drinking this style of wines, and more producer is coming to make this style of wines. So I can tell you that we have been growing without any problem. I feel that yes, we have to do an evangelization work, because we are not anymore talking when we explain a wine, the quality through the quantity of oak and new oak that we use. We have to talk a lot about the place. We have to spend a lot of time doing this kind of things, explaining why our place is so unique. But I'm sure that the future is identity and uniqueness. So now I feel that it's not difficult, that is something that is being more and more easy for the consumers.
That's cool. Thank you.
On this third wine, can you give us an idea of a visual on the altitude on this one compared to the other two?
Yes, the other two, San Pablo was 4,800 feet. Gualtajari was 4,500 feet. Here we go down 3,600 feet. But let me go to the presentation. But wait a minute.
This is where the winery is located as well, in Altamira.
Yes, but it's in the south of the Uco Valley. So it's lower altitude, but in a southern position. When you move to the south of the Uco Valley, the temperatures go down. So it's warmer than the two wines that we tasted before, but not a lot, much more warmer.
Okay, thank you.
Could you
My pleasure.
show some photos of these vineyards, Seba?
Sorry?
The Altamira vineyards?
I will show you a picture. 1 second. Thank you, Lara. 1 second that I'm looking for.
The Finca pages.
Yes. This is the vineyard. You can see the quantity of stones that we have in the vineyard. And the other very important thing is that the soils.
Tell the story about the trucks. with the
Yes.
stones.
Let me see. These are the soils, and especially for concreto, the soil that you have on your left, that look at, you have a 10 centimeters of soil, and then you have the stones. When I saw this kind of soils for the first time, I was worried about how the vines could grow there. But you can't believe how the vines put the roots and go down. And our challenge, like viticultures and with irrigation, is make that the vine put the roots very, very deep. And what Adam is telling to you is that when I arrived to Altamira, we have a property there that the name is Piedra Infinita. Piedra Infinita means infinite stone, because I walked the property and I told to my father, we have to take out 300 trucks to plant this vineyard, trucks with the stones. And we bought the land. We started taking out stones. At the end, we took out more than 1,000 trucks with the stones. So I did a very bad calculation. But because I did a very bad calculation, at the end, we bought the land and we planted this vineyard. But the name is Piedra Infinita, infinite stone, because when we were preparing the land, they never end the quantity of stones that we took out.
I have a quick clarifying question. You said for Concreta, was that the only wine of the ones we're tasting tonight that you reduced machinery and did the stamping of the feet? Or was that all of your wines?
In general, all my Malbecs are made in concrete. I use some oak for Cabernet Franc, and for a couple of
But
wines
no,
that
you
I
said the feet stomping. You said you stomped with your feet. Did I not hear that
the
correctly?
sorry. I didn't understand very well. Depend the area. In Altamira, that is the area of the last wine that we tasted, I work between 80 to 100% of whole bunch. When we travel to Gualtajari, we work between 30 to 50% of whole bunch. And in Sao Paulo, we work without whole bunch, with this team 100%. So depend the area where we are cultivating is the quantity of whole bunch that we do. And yes, we crush with our fits. We spend a lot of time with our fits in the vats.
Seba, at one point you mentioned to me that the whole bunch fermentation, you're trying to avoid too much carbonic maceration, right?
Yeah, you know that when
So
you use whole bunch, happen a carbonic maceration if you leave the whole bunch. What happened with the carbonic maceration? Carbonic maceration is a technique of vinification. So if I make carbonic maceration in Sao Paulo, in Gualtajari, and in Altamira, we are going to talk more about the carbonic maceration than the place. So it's for that we need to crush with our fits in order to avoid the carbonic maceration. When we talk about carbonic maceration, we are talking about, for example, wines made like in Beaujolais, where you have this kind of vinification that give us these specific aromas, that these specific aromas come from the kind of vinification that you do, not from the place.
perfect. So that's why you use the feet stomping, right?
Yes.
Okay.
All of you are invited to work in the
The harvest is a fun time. We're in it right now.
yes. At the end, in many things, is back to the future. More we go ahead, and especially when you want to make wines that talk about the place, more simple or simpler you have to do the things. At the end, is simplicity. It's all about connection with the place, be in the place, know your place, make a great viticulture, and then be connecting with what you are doing in the vineyard and in the winery. We spend more time in the vineyards than in the winery. My work during the harvest is, for example, take harvest decision. That is one of the most important things. So tomorrow morning, I met with Martin, that is who runs the vineyard with me, and Laura, who ran the winery with me, and we are going to spend all the morning tasting grapes and taking the right harvest decision, and also the vinification decisions, because when the grape arrives to the winery, you have no information. All the information of a grape is in the vineyard.
I have a question about the aging of your wines, because these are still kind of, I mean, they're pretty young wines. So do you prefer that people drink them as they're out on the market, or are there any that you say will get a whole lot better if you hold on to them for a little while?
I believe that the great wine is great from the beginning, and then depend how you like the wines. I believe that our wines will age very well, because our wines that are not built in the muscle is built in the bone. So we are working more on the structure than on the feeling of sweetness. So I feel that our wines are like marathonists that will age very well. But then depend how you like to drink the wines, because this is the same wine. Some people prefer to drink younger or older. But I think the wines that we are making will have a great evolution.
Seb, I have a question.
Yes.
So I saw on your slide you had Chile on one side and Argentina. Do you guys? I had a Chilean wine a couple of weeks ago and it was really good. Do you guys have? I know every wine has an identity, but is there something succinct or distinctive as far as characteristics to Argentinian wines that are not, the same in Chile? Like, is there, and vice versa? There's something like that separates them because of their climate, the Western and the Eastern climate.
We are extremely different because the Andes create different conditions in one side and in the other. In Chile, you have ocean influence because you are very close to the Pacific. So for example, the rainfall is in winter. In our area, we have no any ocean influence because the Andes isolate us from the Pacific. So for example, our rainfall area, time that is much less than Chile is in summer. So the climate conditions are different. The soils also are different because in, for example, limestone or calcare, you can find a lot in Chile, and in our side, you have a lot. And the other is the grapes. The grapes are different. In Chile, in general, they work more with, in the more knowledge area, they work more with the Cabernet Sauvignon, Carmener, Merlot. In our area, we work more with the Malbec. So we are very close, but the Andes mountain create two completely different situations in one side and in the other.
Right. Thank you.
You like the wines? Any comment about the wines?
I love them. I'll be honest.
When
I
can we
cheated.
visit?
Exactly. I cheated. So I tasted them about a half hour beforehand. And it was like reverse, right? So I did the last one first and then the first one last. And now the taste has totally changed. But they're all amazing. So thank
Right.
you.
My pleasure. And you feel the freshness? This is for me very important. The freshness, the texture, the balance.
I have a question coming from the expert himself. What are some of your favorite food pairings with your wines?
I'm not the sommelier, I'm a winemaker. But, you know, I will tell you something that is more with the heart than with maybe with the palate, but works. In our area, the main important food is asado, is barbecue. Argentina is very well known because meat. And it's very typical to grill the meat. But when you grill the meat, it's not only cook, it's part of the tradition. But I feel that our wines, especially this kind of wines that has this texture, work very well with meat, especially when you work with ribs or something like this, that you have more fatness, because this kind of wines clean the palate in order you can continue eating. So I really like with an asado or with the barbecue.
Nice.
And I like when with rare meat in order that you have more juiciness in the mouth.
Mhm. Nice.
I have a question. I'm Chanel, not Janelle, but we're here together. My question is about how you like cultivate / like inculcate children into a culture of wine. And so like, I'm sure you started to learn about wine very early, but what was your journey like from a child up until the point where you're able to drink the wine and know the wine by the taste? How was that for you?
You know, in my house, wine was the center of the house. Always, I remember my family drinking wine. So always was part of my life. How I started drinking when I was child, we didn't drink Coca-Cola or all these kind of things. We drank wine with soda, with sparkling water. So at the beginning was a lot of sparkling water and only a touch of color. And year to year, the quantity of wine increased and the quantity of sparkling water decreased until I had the age to drink a glass of wine during the lunch or the dinner. But then, you know, for example, in my house, my kids taste the wines. Because we are all the time with wines open, and always they come and they say, "Can I smell? Can I taste a little bit?" So I also think that when you learn how to drink alcohol or wine in your home, then you have much more manage about then how to drink outside of your house. So for us, it's part of our life. And how I was in the family, I grew up in the vineyards. I spent a lot of time when I was a kid in the vineyards and in the winery. Of course, not working, playing, riding a horse, riding bicycle, fishing, doing these kind of things. But then when I finished the secondary school, I felt that I wanted to cultivate vineyards. So I decided to study agronomy.
Okay.
And after that, during the university, I started working in the family. But I think the key that I can be working with the family is that nobody, our parents, put pressure to us to choose, to say you have to do this. So if I'm talking with you today, it's because it was my decision. I don't feel that they put me pressure on my decision. Of course, they show me how fantastic is the wine world. More you give to the wine, more you receive.
Mhm. Great, thank you.
Have you all had to experience any changes in weather or events that have caused you maybe to not have the best harvest, or have you had to learn how to pivot in those situations?
It's a good question about climate change, because today we can listen a lot in the North Hemisphere about the situation of warming. In our area, seems that the temperatures are not rising like in the North Hemisphere. If you see a map of the world, you can see that in the North Hemisphere, you have more land than oceans. If you go to the South Hemisphere, you have more oceans than land. So apparently, because in the South Hemisphere, we have more ocean than land, the temperature is not rising so evident like in the North Hemisphere. So I can tell you that we have an impact in terms of temperature. But as I show you in the presentation, our source of water is the snow melt. And in the last 11 years, the average of snow that we have in the mountain has been less than the historic average. So maybe we haven't seen so fast the rising of temperature, but we can have less availability of water. But it's something that we need to see what's happened and see if it's a cycle or is something that is a tendency.
Their biggest threat is hail, which
yes, we have two big problems.
Yeah,
the big
and
is
frost.
the biggest frost. For example, the last 1st of November, we had a big frost in the area. Mendoza lost 30% of the production. So this is the shortest harvest in the history of my area. And the second big problem is hail. Hail affected 4-6% of the surface every year, but hail is very strong and very sad when it happens to you, because you can lose your production in 5 minutes, and also you lose all the quality.
So what protections do you put in place for frost or hail? Like, do you use sprinklers or heaters or netting or covers?
We use drip irrigation.
Okay.
Drip is the most efficient in terms of managing water, and especially because we cultivate in some areas with the slopes, drip is the best. Sprinklers are very complicated.
For the hail, they use netting.
Yes, for the hail.
Netting for the hail.
And for the frost, we use candles.
Candles, yeah, and the investment in the netting is quite expensive.
Yes, an hectare of net, the price is $5,000.
And so the producers that don't make the investment, unfortunately, sometimes get burned because the hail destroys the crop immediately.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you deal with a lot of like pests or like bugs or birds or animals
You know, pest we have not a lot because we live in a desert and in a very dry area. So mildew or could be the biggest problem, but with copper and sulfur, you control. So the way that we treat the vines is very organic. It's very simple. With 2-3 treatments, you have any problem. Imagine that the rainfall is 200 millimeters, so it's few, it's very low.
I'm
They're
gonna
also
take myself off of
leaders in
mute. I have a
organic.
question. Are you distributed across the country? Where are you distributed by?
Yes, yeah, Zuccardi is distributed in every state. There are 2 brands, Zuccardi and Santa Julia, even in Alaska. Yeah.
Thank you.
If you go to our website, winecellarsltd.com, we have a feature on the website where you can search for local accounts, restaurants and retail, depending on where
Fantastic.
you put in your zip code and it'll show you where the distribution is.
Awesome. We love our where to buy. Thank you.
I'll put the website into the chat so that you can find that.
And we have the US landing page where they can buy online.
Yes, that is true.
I can add that. Let's put yours on and then I'll add the.
Thank you. I know we're gonna tag you guys on IG when we get our picture a little bit later, but yeah, that would be fantastic if we got that landing page.
Great. Any other question?
Don't take our quietness for that we didn't enjoy it, because this is just fantastic. So I just want to say muchísimas gracias a todos. It's just like fantastic for you to be here and be in this community. We are just like in awe. So I just want to emphasize that. Don't take our silence for not appreciating this. This is fantastic. So
I have a question. Outside of the wines that we tasted, what's your favorite varietal to drink?
I'm a drinker before a winemaker. I love wine, so I try at home.
Keeping it real.
I try at home not to drink my wines, to drink wines from many areas around the world. So it's difficult to say because it's full of good wines today, the world. But if I have to tell you my favorite, maybe Piemonte, Barolo is one of my favorite area. But like I told you at the beginning, always I see the place and who makes the wine. For me, these 2 things are very, very important. So I never choose only from the region, also who do the interpretation of the region.
Nice. Thank you.
But I try to drink diverse a lot. It's boring to drink the same wine every day.
Agreed.
This is
And
the
just so
magic
you
of
all
wine.
appreciate, here in Argentina, we have a very protective market. And so it's mainly literally Argentine wine. So, one has to travel and make a little effort to drink outside of Argentina. So you're really lucky living in the US.
Yeah. Sebastian's always buying wine when he comes to the US because we have an abundance of
I'm
choice.
all the time thinking which wine I will drink.
Well, when we come visit you, we'll bring a nice wine suitcase.
Nice.
Great. I will appreciate. I do the barbecue.
All right, does anybody else have any questions? If you don't mind, we're going to try to take a group picture. If you want to hold up your glass, do a nice cheers for the gram. Oh, my blur. Is everybody ready?
If you put it in front, it doesn't blur as much.
Yeah, I think, let me see. Yep, I got it. It's good. All right. Tasha.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Adam, and your team. This was amazing. We had such a good turnout, and I think that everyone really, really enjoyed themselves. And everybody, let's just give one last thank you to their team for all of the great wine that they sent us.
Thank
Yes,
you very much.
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Thanks
Yeah,
for spending your time with us.
So
Amazing.
much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
And we will definitely, guys, please share your experience online, and please tag Zuccardi so everyone can know and we can get the word out about these great wines. And thank you guys again, and I hope you had a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Bye.
Have a wonderful
coordinating.
evening.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone, good night.
Thank you.
Good night.